Hail cheaters! Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
Fantastic, Josh. Here we are with the midfielders. As you noted before we went fully live, too many midfielders to count.
Mm-hmm.
Forwards are sort of a selective group.
Right.
The best strikers of the ball.
Yeah.
Then later on next week, we're going to do defenders and goalkeepers. We don't really think about them too much. Midfielders, This is where we get into like the quantum realm of FPL, right?
Yeah, and I think obviously we've talked on earlier pods. I guess is this now our third pod of the preseason? I think it is. Third or fourth?
Yes, it is third. Yeah. I think it is. We did our reaction to the game last week.
Yep.
Go back and listen to our forwards, best picks in the game.
Yep.
And here we are with mids. So number 3.
Absolutely. And if you want to find out more about how the game, the rule changes, which are, I think, exciting, although honestly, if you didn't read about them at all, it wouldn't change. It's not like it's going to radically change your approach. It's more about the kind of in-season strategy, I would say, right? I think that's what changes. But I think when it comes to actually picking players, and I was thinking about the midfielders, for example, that we were going to discuss on today's pod, I wouldn't say that all of a sudden I'm like really interested in like Bruno Guimaraes or something like, God, I'm sure I butchered his last name. That's a very hard last name to say.
You did fine.
Newcastle's Bruno. I wouldn't say like there are like a number of defensive midfielders that I'm suddenly super intrigued by as a result of the changes. I think, maybe they'll end up affecting things more than I expected, but I think basically you're still looking for goals and assists, and that's where you should be kind of putting your budget and just in general. I mean, it's always good to think about your fourth and fifth midfielders and let's say like fifth midfielders if you're going to play 4. Some people might play 5 across the middle, right? And that's a different strategy too. But when it comes to those kind of cheapish options that are going to be benched most of the time, I think you're really just looking for starters, right? And so on today's pod, we're basically going to do the same style of ranking that we did for last week's pod, which is to talk about our elite tier, Brandon, our Hall of Famers, maybe if you could say that, or our All NBA first team, if I can keep that metaphor going. And then you have your All Stars. And then you have your kind of, it's like the third tier is like a mix of oft injured, right? Mm-hmm. It's like or sort of affordable.
Could have been greats.
Yeah, could have been greats. And it's a mix of like people who like, you just absolutely know what you're going to get. You're going to get 8 goals and 6 assists from some of these guys, right? There's a certain kind of, and then there's the kind of people in there who are like Luis Diaz, where it's like, he's 7.5 million. Could he explode under slot? Right. Is there some change? And but it's actually, it's interesting when you look through some of these too, because like for example, did you know that Luis Diaz had 32 starts last season? If you would ask me how many times Luis Diaz had started last year, I would have been like, I don't know, 25, right? I felt like he got injured a lot.
We had this discussion on the pod last season all the time where you were the skeptic of Luis Diaz. And I was I don't understand the skepticism because he starts every game.
With that said,
I like the pick.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he only had 8 goals and 7 assists. So for 32 starts, I feel like that's kind of disappointing, honestly.
If he doesn't score a goal, does he even start? Yeah. Honestly, it's sort of like if a tree falls in the woods in FPL.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Bowen had twice as many goals as Luis Diaz last season. They're priced the same. Like, what is the? It's so funny. Like when you start to look at some of these players, it's like, you realize how much of your kind of team building when it comes to fantasy is a kind of wish fulfillment. Like, I don't know about you. Right. I love Luis Diaz. I enjoy watching him play. I would like to have him on my team. Right. I would like to see him have a Sung Heung-min level season where he has like 20 goals and 10 assists. There's really no evidence to indicate that he's actually going to do that. But, I'd like to see it happen.
That's what illustrates the complications with the midfielder section of FPL, where with forwards, like we opened the pod saying, they pretty much have one route to fantasy points, and that's scoring goals. Right. You occasionally get a number 9 who, like a Roberto Firmino, who is better at assist fulfillment.
Even Ollie Watkins to a certain degree. Yeah.
And then defenders and goalkeepers, it's pretty clean cut. You get the clean sheets, goalkeeper saves. Occasionally you get the wing backs who have different routes to points. But midfielders, you said wish fulfillment, Josh. There's just any number of ways in which midfielders can become fruitful fantasy assets.
Yeah.
They can just be the Mesut Ozils, where they're getting at least one assist every match, or De Bruyne.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I was going to say Ozil maybe 1 year. Yeah.
There are the goal scoring midfielders like Mo Salah, who I'm sure is going to be the bulk of our conversation in this episode, and then you have those midfielders like Martin Odegaard or Luis Diaz, where you feel like they're just one career step away from becoming this magic fantasy asset, be it through goals or through assists, or I don't even know what. There's just so many ways these guys can score for you.
It's almost the question, right? It's like if you can hit on one of these, like Eze is probably maybe the peak example of that this season, right? If you can, he's available for $7 million in terms of the upside that you could get for him, right? He also gets injured like every third match, right? And so there's a kind of, he's a little bit in that Diogo Jota camp where it's like, man, it's like if it just all came together, it'd be. And Jota, by the way, I do think he has some interesting out of position potential. There was a quote from Slot from over the weekend where he said, "I want to play with a true forward this season." Now, he did not say, "I want Darwin to play as the true forward this season." So I think it could be very interesting what we see, up front. I mean, honestly, it could be solid. I mean, again, you and I, or I guess everybody who's listening to this podcast, if you're kind of a fantasy player, you think about stuff through a fantasy lens, right? But of course, for a normal person, for a normal person, Mo Salah is a forward, right? In the game, he's classified as a midfielder. It always trips people up, I think, when they first get into fantasy. Like, wait, that player why is he a midfielder?
Or for a normal person, they don't even say midfielder forward. They're like, oh, Salah is a winger.
Right.
He plays wide.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot to discuss in this week's pod. But just interestingly, now that we're talking about players that we'd like to succeed, because there's actually quite a few, I think, on this list. Is there a player that you are rooting against? Like, do you have an anti-wish fulfillment player? Is there a player that you would like to see? Again, these are all millionaires. They're all doing fine. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, who would you like to see, not succeed this season in fantasy? I've got one.
Ooh, okay. You hit me. This is a great question, and I'm sure
you go first. I want to put you on the spot here. Okay.
Well, I guess I'm sort of sick of the whole Pascal Gross adventure.
Okay.
It's like a book that most of your friends have dipped into, and you're just kind of like, yeah, it wasn't for me. I don't really want to talk about it. That sort of a thing. So I guess I'm rooting for the like boring mid-tier guys. I want this to be a like all action, very flashy midfield season.
Mm-hmm.
That is my hope, I guess. Yeah. So, I mean, that feels kind of mean-spirited that I just went for Pascal Gross.
He's fine.
Maybe Garnacho. I find Garnacho to be very annoying just for superficial
the
reasons.
haircuts, I know. Sometimes I do root against a player because of his haircut. And I don't feel great about it either. But we're all human. We have instinctive responses. Now, if we could include forwards, I feel like I know who you'd pick here, Brandon.
Well, Richarlison,
of course,
obviously, The hate mail is already rolling in for this 10th season of Always
That's
Cheating. Somebody responded to last week's episode saying, "Nice podcast, but I didn't like the disrespect to Mo Salah." And I was like, "What did we say?"
I didn't remember either. I assumed you did because you have a tendency, especially once we enter hour 2 of the pod. I feel like that's when you get like a little more unleashed. Like, you get the polite version of Brandon in the first 55 minutes or so.
But just to preface all of this, to all the Garnacho fans, the Pascal Gross fans, our job in preseason is to prognosticate.
Right.
It is to wildly prognosticate.
Sure.
Can we predict the decline or the incline of anybody's fantasy career?
Yeah.
And to do this, we have to say things that half of the people listening are not perhaps not going to take to.
Exactly. And that's where my anti-rooting interest, because I haven't.
So who you got?
Well, I have an interesting one because I actually quite enjoy watching him as a player. Like when you remove the fantasy from it, I really enjoy watching him play. But for me, it's Bruno Fernandes. I just find it very tiring to have him in fantasy. Like it's very. When you have to watch him in matches and you've got like a fantasy stake in him, the screaming at the referee, the sort of this sort of like the almost brilliance of his game, and to a certain degree, it's because he doesn't, he hasn't really played with a true forward in a few seasons, right? I mean,
well,
we'll see
you sound like Bruno Fernandes's parents. Like you're watching your son from the stands, and you're like, well, my son isn't performing to what I think the standards I hold him to.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the second phase of just blaming everybody around him.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much. I'm like a sports dad with him. I mean, I thought he was good this summer for Portugal. I mean, the whole Portugal problem, of course, is that they all had to, be kind of subservient to Ronaldo. Exactly. Yeah. But he's one where I'm just sort of, I think I'm kind of done with him in fantasy. Okay. So
sounds like we're not going to be super high on Manchester United.
Well, I don't know, Kobe Mainu. I mean, he's kind of interesting. And actually, I mean, we'll talk about Garnacho too. We've actually covered everybody now, Brandon. So I think you've already, the download's already been registered. You can feel free to stick around through the first ad break if you would, and then
5-star reviews.
Then you're all good. Yeah, subscribe on YouTube if you're listening that way. All right, so let's jump into the pod though, Brandon. Let's kick things off though. I was actually on an Always Cheating scouting mission last night.
Nice.
Love to hear. Went to Yankee Stadium to watch Man City host. Well, I suppose they hosted. I mean, they were, the NYCFC plays there, and Man City are the parent club. Yeah. So
the mothership hosted.
Yeah,
in a way, right?
Exactly. So I saw Man City play AC Milan. We did get a little Christian Pulisic sub appearance. I think that was to.
What was that like in the stadium when he came onto the pitch?
Good, rich, warm applause. I mean, it was an American crowd. Like they were happy.
Rich and warm.
Well, I mean, like it was like the 81st minute of a friendly when everybody good had already left the pitch. There wasn't too much to
and a lot of fans had probably already left the stadium. Now, do you think there were more people excited to see Jack Grealish and Erling Haaland there than to see Pulisic? Like, what was the sort of the fan depth chart there?
It was it was actually quite a balanced. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised because New York is such an international city, but there was quite a balanced mix between AC Milan and Man City supporters. A lot of Man City jerseys, and I do wonder if part of it was because it's at Yankee Stadium, and so you probably had NYCFC fans. And although I definitely saw more Man City kit type stuff than I did, and not too many scarves. It was like it was almost 90 degrees. I don't know what that is in Celsius, sure. 12 or whatever.
A silk scarf in that kind of weather.
Yeah, exactly. They did have some half and half scarves that I thought they didn't look great. Also, it's called like the DirecTV World Soccer Tour or something. I was like, first of all, you can call it football. Like, come on, I think we can handle football. And then it was like the DirecTV was in huge letters, and I don't know problem with DirecTV, but it was like I feel like last year was a little more. It was called like the International Champions Tours. Like it was a better name. It sounded more
pretend official. Like it's some kind of a fake
exactly.
Tournament.
Yeah, give me
okay,
something.
So Let's get to the FPL sort of it. So give us the read on Man City.
Yeah, I thought.
What did you think about Erling Haaland?
Haaland scored. I think in the 12th minute. He looked great. I mean, I think he was very involved. I thought Oscar Bob looked great as well. I mean, he's sort of he's like the next. Well, we'll see what happens, right? I mean, if Alvarez leaves this summer, I think he could get more minutes. But he's like has like Cole Palmer-ish potential if you were to move on, somewhere else.
We talked about Julian Alvarez. I don't know why I just decided to drop the J there, but I'm doing it. I'm going with it. We talked about him in our Forward podcast last week, and I was sort of, we were both speculating about his future. Yeah. And I didn't realize at that time that Alvarez is in the Argentina Olympic squad.
Oh, is that right? I didn't realize that either, actually.
The fact that he's in the Olympic squad says to me that he's all but guaranteed to be sold off, because that's basically Man City saying to Alvarez, listen, you don't need to worry about your minutes at the start of the season because you're not playing, so go to the Olympics.
That's interesting. I actually missed that. I knew that Mateta was playing for the French team with Lacazette. It's such a funny
and Michael Elise too. They've some fun players.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore with him. But
sure, yeah.
At that point, it didn't matter, Brandon, because he's already gone.
We'd already seen all the fantasy points.
But yeah, I think I mean Alvarez. Well, so I thought Oscar Bob looked good. I actually thought Grealish looked kind of irrelevant. He was really not involved at all in the play, and maybe that was because I was on the other side of the pitch, and but I really felt like it was honestly Oscar Bob that I thought was really was the more impressive of the two kind of wingers, I guess you could say. It was shifting around a lot. It was loose. It was not like the tightest, of formations, but it wasn't. I mean, it was not super sloppily played. I thought it was kind of on par with. Remember we saw Brighton, Newcastle last summer. It was on par with that. It was a fun experience. I ran into Boston Prof, a longtime Patreon supporter. That was really fun, and his family,
awesome.
His son especially was a really really cool guy. I mean, he's a kid, but he was just like he had all these kits, and he's just like he was like a basically I want my 7-year-old to turn into a football fanatic the way he is. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, I would say I brought my 7-year-old. It was their first ever soccer match, and in Quinn, I would say that Quinn had the most polite bad time that a person could have. They really did not enjoy any part of it, from the crowds to the match. They just kept saying, "I don't know what's going on," and I was like, and then. It's just a classic. Any parent knows this too, where you're like, well, let me try to explain it to them. They're like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want. I don't know what's going on, and I really don't want you to try to explain it to me either. So that was an interesting. And so we did leave a few minutes early, and that's how I know I'm like officially a dad now too, because I was like, well. We were able to sit down in the subway on the way back because we left early enough, and so that was.
Listen, when we had season tickets for NYCFC at that godforsaken baseball stadium.
Yep.
The best thing we could ever do at any match is leave early.
Leave early or stay around. Like go to those like the bars that line. Because I have to admit though, I mean, I'm glad that NYCFC is moving to the new stadium by Citi Field, because it really. Listen, they did the best. Whatever. I mean, like, I don't want to nag NYCFC or MLS or anything like that, but watching a football match / soccer match in a baseball stadium is not a great experience. It just, you never quite feel like you're fully inside. Like, it always feels like an exhibition, it's just the vibe. It's a tougher vibe to overcome, right? Like we were kind of behind home plate, right? Where we were sitting. And so our seats were amazing. They're like the most expensive seats for a Yankee game, but it's kind of like you can see home plate in front of you. You kind of, there's like an element of like, you've got to like kind of suspend, your disbelief a little bit to really enjoy the match.
It's the South Park movie Basketball all over again. Like, what if we grafted another sport onto a baseball diamond? I have one last question about this match that I think we should save until next week.
Okay.
Because every preseason match that I'm now seeing, City are like leaking tens of goals.
Yeah, and they did concede 3. I don't really know how representative it is. I mean, they did have Ederson, although who knows what's going to happen there with him. So I don't really know if we almost ever. I mean, we'll see who they start the season with. I think that's really the one question that we can't really answer at the moment. Is who's going to be ready for game week 1? I think we'll have a better sense of that over the next couple of weeks. I mean, I think that for the kind of anyone, I'd honestly say from like a Europa League level on down, they're just going to get those players back into the squad. But a club like Man City that has enough squad depth, they can wait a little bit longer, I think, to give players, full time kind of back into the squad, which I think, makes someone like Grealish a little trickier.
No one's going to read into these results, goals or goals conceded otherwise, but it's just to me, it's very interesting when talking about Man City, because they always have the highest rated defense or close to with like low value in the defensive fantasy assets. So it's always like a very fraught sort of subject. Okay, so I love these scouting reports. If you have scouting reports of your own from preseason matches, you should reach out to us, shoot us a tweet or an email, and because there's so many. Like if I go to my FootMob app and just see club friendlies, it's just like billions.
Arsenal Man United played last night as well. I think that was a 1-1 draw. Went to pens. And again, like you never want to read too much into this stuff, but it can be useful. And certainly if right, like seeing Haaland score so easily in yesterday's match, it's another reminder that maybe despite the price, we have a player who is truly going to be fresh going into the season. Maybe we just have to kind of swallow our fiscal responsibility, Brandon, and our
Sure. Take out
fiduciary
a loan.
responsibility to have a balanced squad and bring
Call
in
mom and dad, borrow some cash.
Exactly.
Be fine. Pay it back later.
By the way, a second ago I said it made the preseason stuff made Grealish tricky, and that I meant Foden. Actually, Foden is the one that I think is a little tricky because of the because of the break. But as we mentioned before, we're going to talk about midfielders on today's pod. The news is finally starting to. We're starting to get actual news, right? Like transfers are starting. If they're not fully across the line, they're starting to get there. There's enough interesting news now that I thought we could maybe start today's pod just going through some of that as well. Do some kind of quick thoughts. So the first one is one of the bigger signings. It hasn't officially happened yet, though it looks like it's going to happen maybe as soon as Monday, which is Ricardo Calafiore. It's a great name, by the way, Ricardo Calafiore. He's set to sign with Arsenal. It's a $40 million deal. He can play as a left back or a center back. Apparently, this was one of the deals that Arteta was really enthusiastic about getting across the line in preseason. And so I think it creates an interesting situation from a fantasy perspective, which is you don't sign a 40 million left back / left-sided center back without planning to play him some serious minutes, right? And so I think it creates a little bit of first of all, I think Zinchenko is just in trouble now. Like he might be more of the Champions League type option. But I think, Jurgen Timber, the classic, it's truly preseason when an injured player gets treated. Arteta said it was like a new signing, the classic, like it quotes, he's like a new signing for us. So you have Timber, you've got Calafiore joining. He played a lot as center back last season as well. So I do think that it creates a little bit of risk for Gabriel too. And so I don't know if you've been following any of this at all, but does it sort of give you pause with Arsenal's defensive assets?
Yeah, following it a little bit, and certainly seeing Timber line up in virtually every Arsenal preseason squad, and often in the center back position. Now, it's a little bit more fluid in Arteta's system, but it makes me agree with you even more in that where does Timber play? And if you get Calafiore and Timber, who would both be potential starting options, then Zinchenko and Gabriel gone, and then you could feasibly have a Saliba Calafiore or Saliba Timber plus Calafiore on the left, and then like whoever's playing on the right.
It's got to be Ben. I think
Ben White, of course. Yeah. So I don't have a strong opinion on Gabriel's abilities at center back. I generally think highly of him. It's hard. I've rarely been watching an Arsenal match and seen Gabriel is the most at fault player in the defense. Saliba's also one of the best center backs in the league, and he'll have one mistake a match. Yeah. So I think it's tough. I think it's very tough to call from a fantasy perspective. To your point, so are we suddenly back at Saliba is the only guy if you're not willing to pay the Ben White price?
It honestly makes me wonder if Ben White is worth the extra 0.5 million. He really did come on as a kind of attacking fullback the second half of last season, and maybe we are kind of underrating that a little bit, and maybe he's worth that extra 0.5. And it really just depends on what you do with your midfield, I think, because we'll talk a little more on this pod. I know that I feel like, and again, it's just like a little bit of taking a scan of what I'm seeing people talk about board. It feels like a lot of people are trying to talk themselves into a Salah, Haaland starting 11, right? Like start the season off with those two. And if you do, and there's some reasons for that. And we actually, one of the questions we have in our mailbag section of today's pod, we'll talk about that a little bit. But if you do, I don't really, it makes it very hard, I think, to squeeze in the kind of Ben White type players. And if you go without even one of them, I think you have the money to do it. So that's a consideration. I think the other move I want to talk about is another Arsenal move. This one I'm really curious to know your thoughts as a Fulham supporter, and that's looks like Emile Smith-Rowe is going to join Fulham from Arsenal, and he's 5.5 million. Last year, obviously, didn't play much. 2 seasons ago, he had a 10-goal season though, and super talented. I think it's an interesting signing. What do you think?
I love the signing for Fulham. I think every Fulham supporter was terrified after the Polinia sale, and there was just like crickets coming from Craven Cottage. Like, see a couple of outgoings, including our best midfielder, and there's nothing coming in.
Yeah.
Emil Smith Rowe, it's tricky when you see the like cast-offs from bigger clubs like in London. You're like, are we getting like the leftovers?
Yeah.
But with Smith Rowe, he's young enough, and we have like actually seen enough of him in important matches in the Premier League to say, yeah, this kid has talent. Yeah. And from a fantasy perspective, I think he only sweetens the pot for Fulham, because in my initial draft, I had Andreas Pereira, who's also 5.5, set piece taker, occasionally on pens for Fulham. So what does the Emil Smith Rowe signing do for the rest of Fulham's assets? Well, I think it just makes everybody better, because I could see Andreas remaining more central, and then Emil Smith Rowe being the replacement for Willian / Iwobi on the left. Right. And I can see actually the attacking prowess of Fulham actually getting better. And then there is a knock-on effect to the man we left out of last week's podcast with Muniz.
Yeah.
And like
Frankie's boy.
But I to go back to that striker conversation, I do feel like, because you've got possibly two options in Andreas and Emil Smith Rowe at 5.5, I feel like I'm going for the Fulham midfielder there every day over Muniz, because I wonder if there's just like more to pick from in this bracket, or like just like either it's not that there's more to pick from in the bracket for forwards, it's just like there's just different options that are like better.
He's 0.5 million cheaper too, which is not exactly. than Muniz. So I think it's a good signing. I think it's kind of an exciting move for them, just because you never know. I mean, you could get that kind of like Jesse Lingard at West Ham level season, right, where it's just sort of talented player has been itching to get more minutes. Finally gets that time and kind of explodes. I mean,
or even Andreas Pereira, who did the same thing coming from Manchester United to Fulham. Fulham is just like one of a handful of great clubs in the Premier League where players with talent can get just that much more room to breathe and express themselves. And Marco Silva is, I think, really good with young players. And I have a feeling that Emil Smith Rowe and his agent don't agree to this move unless there's some sort of an understanding between him and the manager that like I'm coming to be in the starting 11 if I play well enough.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I'm sure they hope that happens, right?
Yes, yeah, certainly. Yeah. And there's certainly no one could guarantee that. Yeah. It's all down to player performance.
All right. Well, we've got a couple other ones. We can just kind of bang through these real quick. But I thought it's interesting to see Sarr join Crystal Palace from Marseille and Watford's Sarr. He's only 26 years old still. It feels like he's been around forever, but he's still young player, talented, 15 million. So they use some of the Michael Elise money to bring him in, I suppose. And I like it as a move. I mean, it feels like I was looking at his FPL returns, right? Just like, he didn't do too much in Marseille. Like he's never totally kind of turned into who we thought he might be, right? There was always that amazing match where he exploded. I think he was basically single-handedly responsible for ending Liverpool's unbeaten season to that point.
Yeah, unreal match. Yes.
Yeah.
And, yep.
So, but I think that's kind of a fun deal. He's still not in the FPL game, so he doesn't have a price yet, but I kind of like that as a move. Me
too. For sure. Yeah. No comment. No further comment.
A couple other quick hits. And again, if you have no comment, then we'll just go through it. But Everton has a deal in place to sign Ireland center back Jack O'Brien. I think the big news here is basically this could end up leading to Branthwaite moving on to Man United. They've been sort of going back and forth on a price there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Philippe Jorgensen signs a deal with Chelsea. And this is Maresca wants an additional goalkeeper capable of using the ball well with his feet. Right. Every modern, football manager brand wants that ball playing, a keeper who can use his feet. So
I could use one myself.
Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah. So
just to clean the toilets and wash the dishes. It'd be great.
Exactly. It'd be amazing. Yeah. If I could use my foot like a third hand or fourth for that matter, like Doc Ock, that'd be incredible. So that's an interesting move. We'll see what he comes in at price wise. He could be
big one for the Jorg Hive.
Yeah.
Big week for the Jorg Hive.
Big week for the Jorg Hive. So then Ederson, could be on the move. There's two Saudi. That was breaking from Boston Prof last night. I didn't realize how close that was to happening. But there's a couple of Saudi Arabian clubs, and the comments were kind of disheartening. I love Ederson. I don't want him to leave. And Pep was like, "Well, I hope he stays." And Ederson was like, "Well," he was basically like, "Yeah, exactly." And
death warrant signed.
And Ederson was like, "Who knows? We'll see what God decides or whatever." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." Like, or your manager, like your agent who's going to make money from any deal that happens. So unfortunately, Ortega's priced at 5.5 million, so it doesn't really open up a cheap goalkeeper option. But I mean,
FPL cut us off at the pass there.
Yeah, exactly. It was they were smart. They were smarter going into this season. I felt like they knew what they were doing going into this new season, Brandon. Then one final quick note, which is that Brentford's new signing, Thiago, who we talked briefly about in last week's pod, likely out for months with an injury, which makes Ivan Toney likely to stay, and I suppose likely to be a starter. I know you're like super down on Toney.
Do you think this is like a Nancy Kerrigan sort of a situation where Toney just like...
I mean, who knows? He might have some debts he's still paying off, to some various bookies. He might have, who knows? So this could maybe make Toney an option. Brentford do have a nice run of fixtures to start the season.
It's crazy, Josh, how quickly I've pivoted on Toney.
I don't get it.
I'm not interested.
You're way too.
Anymore.
I know. I feel like you're way too down on him. I like Ivan Toney. All right, so he scored a great pen too for England in the. I think it was in the quarterfinals.
A great novelty pen. Every Premier League manager wants.
Yeah, that's true. It would look cool though. The look away, no look pen is cool. Okay, come on, give me a break. All right, so. So we should get into our midfielder discussion, though. I want to quickly note our Patreon is up and running. Got a bunch of new Patreon supporters this week. First of the month comes up in a couple days too. It's a great time
Bone
to
Thugs and Harmony with a little cameo. There.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see at the crossroads. By the way, what is the Bone Thugs and Harmony?
Well, it's the first wake up. It's the first of the month. Whatever that song's called.
I really only know Crossroads. It's the only BTH.
Between the two of us, we know two
songs. That's true. So you get an extra podcast each week. We actually we're starting to plan out those. We want to have more guests on and do some more fun things this season. Once we kind of wrap up our preseason discussion, though we're going to do a live. I think our plan is to do a live deadline day, stream just for our Patreon supporters. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
We're going to get the leaks.
We're going to get those leaks this year. Yeah, exactly. We're going to be on the clock. I'm going to make sure I'm going to clear out that calendar, Brandon, and be ready for that pod.
Well, the newest invention by the Always Cheating Patreon community is the community team that our friend Francis and all the brain trust in the Discord is getting up off the ground. So that's just like one of many things. Like we're going to have a weekly community run team in addition to all the vast other mini leagues and cash leagues you can join at your will.
Yeah. So extra podcast, mini leagues, kit giveaway contest. I've got one of the kits that we gave away right behind me here. I won't even try to say the club's name any longer.
Dolan Hamlet.
Yeah, there you go. Brendan said it. So I didn't have to. And thank you to our newest Patreon supporters, Claire Hennigan, MJ, Daniel Bell, Craig Jackson, and Mike Scrafford. Craig Jackson's new producer. Ooh, I like that.
Thank you.
And we should also thank producer Andy Penn too, Brandon. Nice early. Wow.
Well done, Andy.
We don't do a lot of pods in front of a live studio audience, but it's nice. It's nice when we do.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us this week. We're also super excited to partner with Fantasy Football Hub again this season. So if you can go to fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always to get up to 50% off a season-long Hub membership that discount lasts until game week 1. That's fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always. I really, honestly, even before this pod today, Brendan, I really like this preseason guide that they've got. It's a kind of a great one-stop shop, super useful. You get Ben Prellin's transfer planner spreadsheet. You win your money league or get your money back. Money League, Mini League. I meant to say, not Money League. It's not Money Train or whatever. What I'm talking about here.
Yeah, no, this is like it feels like a gimmick, like send in a proof of purchase to Fantasy Football Hub.
Yep.
But no, like this is the real deal. And we were talking with them just last week, and they're like, this is serious. We've had people, like, they've been in contact with people where, where it's just like, how did your season go? But they're very serious about the tools they have.
Yep.
And we hear it too. Like, the more engaged you are, the better your odds are of just having a better fantasy season. And the fact that the Hub puts their money where their mouth is and says, listen, the tools we have are going to help you win, or at least help you enjoy. And this is like where it fits with the always cheating ethos is, to make fantasy fun is secretly to win at fantasy. And like the more tools you have at your disposal, the better. And the fact that Hub just sort of like collects them all in one place for you, so you don't have to go scattered to various Twitter accounts, etc., is just super convenient. So fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always, and use that URL to get 50% off any tier at Fantasy Football Hub for the entire season. fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always.
Wow. We're gonna have to clip that, Brandon. That's such a nice, clean little read from you there. And then our Super League open to everybody. No payments or discount codes required. You can just go to alwayscheating.com and click the button at the top. Join that Super League. It usually gets around 20,000 plus. A nice strong number. A
couple seasons ago, we finished in the top 5 mini leagues on the site. I don't know how. I know there's sort of like the dark art to calculating that, but it's a strong league, Josh, and it's hard to win. That's why we call it the Super League. But if you win, listen, get anything you want from the Always Cheating.
I think I finished in the top 300 or something like that once. Yeah, exactly. I just want to get on the first page one year. I just want to get in the top 50. All right, Brandon. Well, let's jump into our elite midfielder. Well, it's a midfielder discussion. We're going to kick things off, though, with the elite midfielders. Let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I slipped 5 midfielders into the elite tier here, Brandon. And just like we did last week, I'm going to share with you a link to my fun little spreadsheet, Brandon, with all this data that I have pilfered. No, I haven't pilfered. It's freely available, but I took it from ffstuff.com.
You did the work, so our listeners didn't have to. And I love that about you, Josh.
Yeah,
thank you.
I did. And there's a chap. Oh, there we go. I figured out how to share something with you. It took me 60 seconds. But I'll also share my screen here, Brandon, so you can take a look at it. You don't even have to click through if you don't want to. So we're going to kick things off, though, Brandon, with our elite tier, right? So these are the players that are, at least some of these players are going to be in virtually everybody's squad, to start the season. And, obviously you can't have all of them because they're just too expensive. But I think there are 5 players that fall into the elite tier this year. Palmer, Salah, Saka, Foden, and Son. And in some ways, I feel like Son is being a little overlooked right now going into the season. And so I want to talk about him more. But I will say he's 5th out of 5. These aren't even necessarily in order, Brandon. That's just kind of the order that I put them together. So let's kick things off, though, with Cole Palmer. We actually ended up talking about him weirdly, not weirdly given how rambly you and I can get, but we ended up talking about Palmer on last week's pod. A massive jump, right? Started last season at 5 million, leaves from Man City, goes to Chelsea, and kind of immediately turns into, I guess it took him a couple of weeks to earn a starting spot, but kind of once he did, it was because I remember when you and I went to London in early November. I remember you were an early adopter of Cole Palmer. Mm-hmm. It really should have helped you have a better season. I don't really know why I didn't do more, but you were an early adopter for Cole Palmer, and and I remember I was not sure still if I wanted Palmer because I wasn't wholly convinced that he was going to hold down a starting spot, right? And this stuff is also obvious in hindsight, right? I mean, now he's banging in goals in the, in Euro elimination matches, but at the time it was like no one really knew what he was. Yeah, who is this guy exactly? It's like the way we talk about Oscar Bob now, right, Brandon? It's like, oh, there's a lot of potential there. So, but he explodes. He starts last season at 5 million. Now he is 10.5 million, the largest ever season over season price rise. Currently owned by almost 60% of managers in the game. So he has a gigantic ownership already to like in preseason. Highly owned, and understandably so, right? 22 goals, 13 assists last season. Again, we really only have one season to even refer to because the numbers so thoroughly dwarf anything he did before that, right? Because he kind of only got spot minutes at Man City. He was on pens for Chelsea, but not only was he on pens, but he was an incredible creator, right? I mean, he was just incredibly involved in kind of everything, every part of Chelsea's attack last season. Finished top in bonus points for midfielders last year as well. So just, a spectacular player, spectacular season. I know he's kind of like the first name in your team sheet going into game week 1. And so do you have anything you want to say about Cole Palmer that hasn't already been said?
I want to pivot. I want to walk back everything I said last week because I have gone in my current draft, I've gone for a Mo Salah draft.
And God. You were like, last week you were like, he's the only player that's a lock for my squad.
So I can't like realistically say anything to contradict that. Like I still feel like Cole Palmer is incredible upside. My issue is there are a lot of upside players. And if you look at Haaland, am I willing to go Foden over Haaland, basically, as quote unquote coverage? With Mo Salah, am I willing to go, I don't know, Gakpo, Szoboszlai for Darwin for coverage?
Saka, Son?
Well, no, I'm talking about like team by team coverage.
Yeah. Do you believe in coverage though? I don't think you need coverage. Like
I don't necessarily, but this is just for the purposes of this argument and looking looking at sort of like the fixtures is I guess when you compare Palmer, the point is when you compare Palmer to the value that you're going to tie up in the likes of Haaland and Salah, is Palmer going to be worth it at 10.5? So meaning, is Salah going to be worth it at 12.5? You kind of gravitate toward, I think so. Like he has proven over the course of 6 seasons that he will earn that back for you.
Well, let's take these two together then, because I am in team fade Mo Salah territory. And the reason why is I basically, he turned 32 over the summer. His goal and assist numbers have declined for 3 straight seasons. New manager, could be a little bit of, I don't know, just like the apple cart's like a little upset, right, with the new manager. I mean, obviously, I still think he's a 90-minute guy. I think he's obviously brilliant, right? It's not like I'm not making some case for him being like a worthless fantasy asset, but I think at 12.5 million. I just think his price should be a little lower, honestly. I don't know that you're necessarily going to get that much from him. And I'll bring in a third player here, Brandon, because we're talking about elite territory, which is Heung-min Son, who is, or Son Heung-min, excuse me, who is the forgotten. I feel like he's kind of the forgotten man this offseason. Less than 10% ownership, despite playing Leicester in game week 1, right? So part of the appeal of Salah is that he plays a promoted team in game week 1. Well, you've got that with Son as well, right? And another player also had the season off to rest, had better, overall returns than Salah did last season, right? 17 goals, 10 assists, less than 10% ownership. And perhaps most importantly, he is 2.5 million cheaper than Mo Salah. Like It frees up so much money that you can spread around your team. So for me, I don't know that I am convinced that Salah is worth owning from the jump. I don't know if I can quite see it.
Counterpoint.
Okay.
Fixtures. So let's look at Arsenal or at Liverpool's fixtures to start. They are away Ipswich.
Okay.
They are home hosting Brentford, Manchester United. They famously just put goals past United.
Yeah.
Then it's Forest and Bournemouth, both back-to-back home matches, and then Wolves, Palace. They have, of the top 6 teams, the best opening run of fixtures. So the case for Salah in this, for us to start the season in game week 1 is not necessarily like, in a vacuum, do you believe Salah is priced correctly? In a vacuum, do you believe Salah's career is on the decline? The question is, in a vacuum, in game weeks 1 through 6, where are you going to be if you don't have this guy? Like the upside with him versus Palmer, Son, Saka feels like it. You can easily make the case that it's worth it for Salah. That's what I'd say to that.
Well, I do think the fixtures are good. Would you still have Haaland in that case too?
Yeah. So in the current draft, I have Haaland. I guess like my most expensive core players would be Haaland, Isak, Mo Salah, Saliba, and Guardiola. And then you're then picking and choosing from the mid tier after that. So I do have Haaland as well. Where I miss out is clearly Arsenal. Like, I have to duck and cover Arsenal. Could bury me there. So, this is what we need to figure out as we head into the game week 1 deadline is, which team are we going to try to fade? Is it City? Is it Liverpool? Is it Arsenal? Or is it this and then going back to Palmer, or is it this Chelsea team that were very frustrating last season? And has a new manager that is unseen in the Premier League.
I just feel like I can get there with Haaland a little more easily, even at his price, because I just feel like I can just captain him every single week, kind of regardless of fixture. But I feel like if you have Haaland, and the reason I asked it whether you'd have Haaland too is, I think once you start going fixture by fixture, it's like, well, are you, when are you going to captain Mo? It's like maybe game week 4 no, it wouldn't be game week 4 because Man City hosts Brentford. So game week 3, when they're away to Man United and Man City are away to West Ham, maybe you could, it's like, so it's like it's a lot of money for a player you're not necessarily going to captain in kind of any of these fixtures, and so I think that would be the other argument against him is that, I almost feel like if you don't have Haaland, then I think the case for Salah gets stronger, right? Because of his consistency. And so you could you're like, well, I'm just going to captain him every week, right? I'm just going to, like, it's like you pick one of the two and then that becomes your captain. But I just think having both, it requires a lot of sacrifices, and I think it does make the captaincy a little bit tricky too. So
potentially there is a great 1-2 punch with the captaincy with Salah in game week 1 v Ipswich, and then Haaland in game week 2 v Ipswich. And that's one you have to set up to have both of them, because you can't play I'm going to take a hit to get Haaland in for game week 2. That seems
no, you really can't. You can't pre-bake a transfer with either one of them. They're just too expensive. And I guess that's where I just Son is just an interesting one to me, because he scored again this weekend in a friendly for Spurs, and I just think like Leicester, Ipswich, I think they're both equally kind of strong fixtures, to start off the season. So anyway, I'm just throwing out some other options, because I don't feel like I'm seeing Son talked about enough, maybe, given that you're kind of getting a pretty similar player to Salah in a lot of ways, but for a lot cheaper. So again, just throwing these out there. Okay, how about another somewhat forgotten player here, Brandon, which is Saka, who 10.5 million. So kind of in another kind of tricky price point option, cheaper than Mo, but still, once you're in the double digits, you're entering a pretty heightened territory, right? 10.5 is the same price as Palmer, for example. 16 goals and 12 assists. One thing that's interesting is he almost exactly matched his XG and XA last season. I just thought it was kind of interesting. You compare it to someone like Phil Foden, who had 19 goals and 10 XG. Just like, how did that happen?
Just bangers from him from the 18-yard line.
I guess, I know, but like 19 from 10 feels crazy to me. Like, and it didn't feel like it was like a fluky 19. Like, he was awesome, but it's just a weird.
He was in full flow. I mean, your original questioning, opening this episode with, is: are there going to be midfielders you're rooting against?
Yeah.
The problem with Saka is I hate rooting against Saka.
Yeah.
For reasons that everyone listening will
Sure.
understand if you're not a dyed in the wool Spurs fan.
Yep.
He's just like such a fun player to watch, and it seems
came across really well in that Amazon TV show too. The whatever that was called. The you know what I'm talking about.
Behind enemy lines with Arsenal or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just feel like he is always the player most likely to bury your game week if you don't have him.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't go through dry spells and spells where you're like, man, it's sort of similar to Salah last season. You're like, does this guy ever leave like the touchline?
Yeah.
He's so far
drift a little bit.
so far out, and you watch Arsenal play and you're like, well, God, I have Saka, but I would love to have one of these more central guys, even Trossard, because they seem a little bit more involved. But then when Saka just waves his magic wand, suddenly he does the thing. So I guess if you look at these top tier guys as you've laid them out, Josh, Saka feels like the one that I hate not having the most. Like you can sort of build a narrative around I could anyway. Not having Salah, not having Son, not having Foden. Saka and Palmer just feel like they're the ones who are most nailed to be consistent performers for you week in, week out.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, Saka is. I honestly think Arteta plays him too many minutes, and I do wonder if with some of the changes, one thing I haven't dug through enough. I don't know if you've done this yet, but have you started to dig through the Champions League stuff and how that's going to change?
Not really, no.
This season, and I don't know that you're going to be able to play him as much as Arteta. That is like. I do think that like he just can't play 90 minutes every single match anymore, right? It's like it's too much. So I have to admit I don't really. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where there's a part of me that's like, well, why don't I just get Odegaard and it kind of covers me on Saka a little bit. Right. But then at some point you're like, well, should I just not have any Arsenal midfielders then, right? Because because like Odegaard is, I mean, he's 8.5 million, so it's pretty affordable, but. He's not like the most, he's kind of like, I feel like his goals tend to come in like big spurts, right? It's like he'll have these kind of runs where it's like he'll get like brace, goal assist, brace, and then like 5 blanks. He's sort of like he can be a little streaky in terms of his FPL returns, much less consistent than Saka, to go back to your consistency point.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so these are the premium guys. I guess, Foden is the remaining one.
Right.
And I think the most interesting thing you just brought up is how he outperformed his stats so remarkably last season. And so the question is, everyone was kind of expecting and waiting for Foden to get more minutes under Guardiola. He gets more minutes, and suddenly this great player emerges. He does not a lot, like a not really high functioning. I'm going to get into trouble here, but weird England team and the Euros. I think people wondered, would we see more of Foden there?
He cut a slightly frustrated figure. I feel like
yes.
Was he just a little unlucky? I felt like he was doing
kind of like
things.
A marginally offside goal that he scored that would have been pretty important to that tournament as well. But so you wonder, did he have a breakout season, or did he have an overperforming season? Yeah. What do you think? What's your money on?
I think it was a breakout season. I mean, there's no reason, we've never seen any evidence to think that he's anything but a totally brilliant player, right? Yes, like arguably the England's best, I mean, up there certainly as one of England's best players. And so I think, he and Saka, I suppose, would be kind of duking it out at the moment for that spot. And
Bellingham will have something to say.
Yeah, that's you're right. Yeah, it's true. Maybe I'm too Premier League tunnel visioned here, but actually Bellingham would have a good guess. Although honestly, of the three, he probably had the worst Euros. Yeah. So, but certainly a number of brilliant young midfielders and wingers for England. So I think that Saka does get tricky, because if you had to ask me to rank these elite midfielders, right? Like, and I was putting them in some kind of order, I would probably go. And I'll stick to my guns on the Salah thing, just just from a price perspective. I would go Palmer, Son, Salah, Saka, Foden. So maybe I put Foden above Saka. I don't know. The thing about Foden is just that, I mean, I don't know. It's the same thing as Saka in some ways, which is that I worry about how soon he'll be able to start. It's hard for me to imagine Arteta not just throwing Saka out from game week 1, right? Just like throwing him in there. Whereas Foden, I could see him maybe getting like a bench appearance or something to start the season. And again, that's only one match, but I these are important things when it comes to, every week counts in fantasy, right? Like I don't really want to go into the season ideally with anybody who's a bench risk, right? Like
this is the reason why you've put Son over Foden and Saka in those rankings there. Is it an X minutes sort of a thing? He's just going to play more?
No, I mean, I just think Son has consistently been the better fantasy asset over those players. And he has an attacking manager. I mean, it's just true. Like literally, like just from like if you look at just straight up points, it's true. Right. But if you looked at, goal returns, I think that, I mean, maybe, I guess Foden nicked him by a couple of goals. Again, on 10 XG, Brandon. Let's keep that in mind. But let's see. Okay, yeah. What do you think? So Foden scored 19 goals on 10 XG. What do you think? And I don't actually know this. I'm going to pull it up real quick. What do you think that Son's XG was last season?
Son's XG was he
scored 17 goals.
Probably something like 15.
11-5. So, but again, but although Son is sort of famously, I think he has very consistently outperformed his XG season over season.
Good finisher.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, exactly. Great finisher. Although Foden is too, honestly. And so I think that, I just, to me, Son has earned that kind of top spot. He's kind of in a weird spot. Sometimes I feel like we don't always think about him as a truly elite fantasy asset. I think it's because he was kind of dueling with Kane for so many years.
So, but what do we think is going to happen with Spurs this season? That's something we have not addressed. It's a similar situation with Palmer and Chelsea, where if everyone's already talking about Palmer and to an extent in Cuckoo, which we have to talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of operating under this assumption that Chelsea are going to continue moving in the right direction. Whereas Spurs, who were going to win the league, like within the first 6 weeks of the Premier League last season, suddenly everyone's like, well, the Ange experiment, maybe it's not going the direction you think it is, et cetera. So I guess I'm trying to agree with you here in that I wonder if the Spurs narrative just isn't being cheered about enough or talked enough about, whereas Chelsea, there is this weird, I guess because Palmer was doing these numbers for fantasy in a really malfunctioning Chelsea team, you think the situation doesn't matter for Palmer and Chelsea, where it does for Son and Spurs.
I do. I think the situation matters in both cases, though. I mean, again, if Nkunku is going to get 75 plus minutes in most Premier League matches, I do think that's going to change what we get from Palmer. It could make him even better. I mean, he could barely be much better than he was last season, though, right? It sort of feels like if he's going to go anywhere, it's going to be down, or at least be kind of consistent. Although honestly, even a slight dip would still make him a good price at 10.5, right? Even if he only got 19 goals and 10 assists or something like that, right? Which would be that would represent a decline of roughly 10% from, in goals and assists. That would still make him a fantastic asset
he's merely Son Heung-min at that point.
Yeah, he's merely Son. Exactly. Okay. Now I have to know then I'm not going to do the XG game all the time, but let's just do it one last time, which is Cole Palmer, 22 goals last season. A lot of pens thrown in there too, right? But what do you think his XG was? 22 goals.
18.5.
17.5. Pretty solid, honestly. I mean, it's pretty massive, honestly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on, Brandon, to our next tier here. Okay. Tier 2, which is our kind of all-star type players.
Smash Mouths, brought to you by Smash Mouth.
Yeah, brought to you by Smash Mouth, our this year's new sponsor. As Redbox sadly starts to decline, Brandon, we can't rely on video on demand at grocery stores the way we used to.
When you get the Shrek DVD from Redbox, Smash Mouth is getting a cut.
Yeah, that's true. It's actually an incredible buy for them to bring in. And RIP, by the way, to the Smash Mouth singer. It's really.
Weird as he was, he did deserve to leave this planet.
No one does, though, sadly. All right. So anyway, these are basically, you're going to have some of these players in your squad, 100%. They're starters, but they are not really reliable captain options. And in some ways, they're the kind of, you get consistently strong returns, but you don't necessarily get, maybe they're not as explosive, or maybe they're a little more, maybe they're a little less consistent, right? Like Odegaard is at the top of this grouping, right? And Odegaard falls in that category because we sort of, fantastic player, but kind of he got 8 goals and 11 assists last season, which is fantastic. Excellent season.
Yes.
Had 15 goals and 8 assists the season before. So he almost flipped the kind of returns that he was doing. And it kind of feels like we know what we're going to get from him at this point, right? You're going to average out to roughly 10 goals and 10 assists. Like that's going to be, and obviously like when you remove fantasy from the equation, you're going to get, a terrific midfielder who's going to kind of link up the attack. He's going to do a lot of amazing things. And basically you give him some space kind of at the edge of the 18-yard box and he can do amazing things. It feels like maybe they started to figure that out a little bit last season. I felt like he was getting closed down a little more than he was the year before. But, just from a pure fantasy perspective, I feel like you're basically getting what you're getting an 8.5 million player. Like I would say he's not underpriced. He's not overpriced, right? There's no value there, but you are going to get consistent returns from him at 8.5.
It's a little bit like buying, I don't play the stock market enough to know what a good example is, but like a stock where the whole world knows that this company is on the ascendancy. It's not like we found Odegaard when he was priced at 6 million. Like Odegaard is like, just to beat this metaphor, like he's not going to overachieve the 8.5 price tag based on the last couple of seasons with Arsenal. And if he does, it would be because he launched like the Odegaard iPod or something like that.
Yeah. Is he like a mutual fund or something like that?
A CD, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, it's funny that we talk about him though in those safe, secure terms, because he's like one of my favorite, most exciting midfielders to watch in the league, and I'm constantly rooting for him to maybe turn that corner and become a global superstar. Like that player is potentially in there.
I agree. There's something still kind of fresh about him, and maybe because the expectations were sort of low when he joined Arsenal. He, didn't quite work out when he was it was Barcelona, right, before he joined Arsenal, and
Real Madrid.
It was Real Madrid, right? Yeah. So it didn't quite work out there, and it was Real Madrid because there was the worry we have like another Ozil situation in our hands, and I know you and I can never go like a single pod with he's been gone for like 3 years and we still denigrate him in like every pod, but no, he's
fun times though.
Yeah.
You gotta take the good with the bad.
Do
with
it
a player
week in and
that.
week out. I know, just sheer body language alone, it was really easy to root against him.
Yeah, so, a rich man's Adele Taraps.
But I like watching him play too. I like watching the next guy on our list here too, which is Eze. 11 goals and 5 assists, right? Not spectacular, but that's 11 goals and 5 assists in only 24 starts, right? Yeah. And may take on even more of a scoring load now that Elise is gone. It felt like we were starting to get something out of Palace, kind of the last third of last season. It felt like they were really starting to step up. Obviously, Mateta played super well too. He's a little bit of a risk to start the season because he's with the French Olympic team. But at the moment, we've got a healthy Eze. This has always been the problem with him. Can he stay healthy? But at 7 million, it's incredibly tempting to start the season with him, kind of regardless of fixtures, right? Because he's just like a kind of perfect fourth midfielder, right? If you can afford him, or maybe a third midfielder, but just like in that kind of third, fourth midfielder realm where with a player to me at least, when I've got a third midfielder, I don't mind if I don't get a return every week. What I want is the potential for some 14 pointers, right? Some matches where I might get goal and assist and 3 bonus or something like that, right? I might get some kind of double-digit return, and I feel like he's got that potential.
Yeah, and Crystal Palace, that run of form at the end of last season coincided with the arrival of Glasner, and he instated a new tactical brain into this club, and they were ready to receive it. I am a little slow to act on Eze, I think, just because the team makeup will be a little different from the end of last season with Elise gone and Mateta probably being late to arrive to camp.
Yeah.
So I'm not so quick to warm up to Eze. So we'll see. I'd love for him to do well, but he's not going to be in my game week 1 squad.
I'm not saying he is a lock, but I would like to find a room for him, Brandon, if I can make it work.
So Gordon of Leon Gordon, Anthony Gordon,
Yeah.
Anthony Gordon from
Tony
Newcastle.
Gordon. Yeah,
he's got to be basically neck and neck with Eze. And I would rate, Gordon just consistency at home at St. James Park for Newcastle. I just cannot imagine a fantasy manager going for Eze over Gordon.
Yeah, I mean, at the 0.5 million could make a big difference. Gordon's 7.5. He's in this tier as well, and it's kind of interesting actually because it almost feels like Palmer took a little of his shine, right? I mean, like he was probably the biggest year-over-year exploder once you take Palmer out of the equation. He had 11 goals and 16 assists last season. It's a ridiculous return, and he's only 7.5 million. I mean, it's sort of interesting to me that Palmer got the 5.5 million bump. Now, obviously, just in terms of twice as many goals for Palmer than Gordon, but 11 and 16 is spectacular, right? And we saw it too. It didn't feel fluky. It didn't feel like he was sort of the only one in the squad who could do something. It was like it felt like, and again, especially strong in home matches, not as strong away, but it wasn't like he exclusively got returns in home matches. And I think at 7.5 million, he's a terrific option. And I think if you go with if you end up going with Holland and Wally Watkins up front, right? And you're just like, I just can't get there with, I can't get Isak. I just can't afford to have that much money up front, especially if you're going to go with someone like Salah. I think maybe Gordon helps you fill in that gap, right? Because you're sort of, it's so funny that we keep doing this like coverage thing. Cause I really tried to think this way, but I do think that they have one of the best home fixtures for game week 1, right? And it is always nice to just sort of put a strong foot forward to start the FPL season, right? And so to have somebody for that Southampton match and somebody is at 7.5 million won't necessarily destroy your kind of team structure. I think I think he's great. And again, when I was putting these kind of tier 2 players together, I wasn't doing it in order necessarily. So it's not like I think Odegaard and Eze are necessarily better than Gordon. But it's, I think you're right to bring him up. I think he's maybe he is at the top of this tier 2 list.
Yeah, and to be clear about coverage, I think what we do as fantasy managers is you're to a degree betting on outcomes.
Yeah.
So, and what you need to do is bet on like the widest range of, it's just like the most goals, the best opportunity to get fantasy points. And so coverage is like, I am pretty sure that Newcastle is going to score 2 to 3 goals against Southampton in game week 1.
Right.
Coverage isn't like I need one player from this team. It's just like I think that a pool of players are going to have a share of those points. I'm going to fit as many of them as possible. In my squad.
And I do think I mean, from a make fantasy fun again perspective, Newcastle's going to be on TV a lot this season, right? Like they have especially for home matches. I think so. I mean, they're. I think that they always are, right? Newcastle is just like especially when they play home matches, they're always on TV. Like they're just one of those teams that often gets a Sunday slot. That there's like St. James Park looks good on TV.
Box office for shirtless fans,
exactly,
big-bodied shirtless fans.
And I think there's an expectation that they'll be very good this season. I certainly expect them to be good this year.
Yeah, they've got pressure to get back to where they were 2 seasons ago, back in the Champions League. That's the expectation from the mothership.
Absolutely. And I think how especially is under some pressure. But I think, when you think about the coverage thing, though, I think when you look at Gordon, the other one who sort of is in the 7.5 million category is Jared Bowen, who had a sneaky good 16 goals, 6 assists comeback season last year, like really bounced back. Again, not a player I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people talk about, but at 7.5 million, another very reasonable price. And I think this is where Odegaard gets tricky and where coverage can be a trap, right? Because if you ask me, again, in any like 5-week stretch, any of these players could outperform the other. And maybe when you start to get into this kind of tier 2 players, these are players that you're going to be spending transfers on, right? Trying to move back and forth, trying to target fixtures and things like that. If Newcastle have a run of 3 home matches and 4, maybe that's when you want to bring in Gordon. But if you just ask me, like by the end of this season, rank how many points Bowen, Gordon, and Odegaard are going to score, I would probably go Gordon, Bowen, Odegaard, like in that order, right? And, with Odegaard third. I'm not like 100% sure about that, but at the very least, I think like they're all going to be very close to each other, right? And Odegaard is a million more, so I think that there's something to think about there.
I don't totally disagree with you. The question mark for Bowen is Lopetegui coming to West Ham, and he has a generally good reputation, even though things just went terribly for him at Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
I am a little, I just don't really understand what we're going to see from West Ham to start the season, which is the ding against Bowen.
That's true.
Is Bowen going to have FOMO? Like he sees all of his buddies from the Euros, like going back to great teams that, are rockets to the moon. And he's like going back to West Ham where like, I don't know. Maybe West Ham are going to like be great to start the season. Maybe, and I look like an idiot.
Well, I mean, this gets to another player that's in this tier 2, which is Luis Diaz. I didn't even throw Jota in here, even though you could as well. But Jota, this is going to happen every year. Every year he's going to get reclassified again. It's like he's going to go back and forth between forward and midfielder. It could happen again next year. But Diaz, 7.5 million, 8 goals, 7 assists. But again, another new manager situation. Played a lot of minutes for Colombia. They made the final of Copa America, so perhaps not going to be as fresh. May not even necessarily start game week 1. Again, I'm making huge assumptions here. We'll know more as we get closer to the game week 1. But I kind of talked myself out of Diaz as I was kind of preparing for this pod. I just see a lot of players that I kind of like more than he does, and maybe. You talked about fixtures with Salah before, and I guess that might be something I need to factor in a little bit more is, do I just really kind of want a Liverpool player? Again, not to have a Liverpool player, but just to have a player for a good run of fixtures who it was 5 million cheaper than Salah. Do I, should I consider him? And so, what do you think about Diaz?
I guess he is in this unfortunate camp where I don't know why this is. Because he is a fun player to watch, but like, why am I waiting?
For Colombia.
It's like I'm waiting for Gakpo or Darwin to be the guy.
Yeah.
And I can't just let Luis Diaz be the guy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be too smart.
I think you're getting at the problem, right? Because I don't have Gakpo in here either, right? Yeah. Gakpo and Diaz were 2 of the most fun players in international football this summer, right? Yes, right. Gakpo was incredible for the Netherlands, arguably their best player. Diaz was similar for Colombia,
carried
right?
Colombia to the final.
Yeah, exactly. It looked awesome, super fun. They're both fun. I mean, and so if one of the 2 of them, or Jota for that matter, who just unfortunately, just only has about 120 minutes in him every, before he gets injured again. He just can't stay healthy. He's a super fun player though too. So it feels like of those 3, one of them could emerge as a great Liverpool asset, but it doesn't feel like any of them are a game week 1 option because it just feels like too. I mean, it's like it's one thing to target a good fixture, but if it really feels like it's like you're just kind of taking a wild swing, then I'd rather just go for the consistency of someone like Gordon at home.
Totally. Yeah. They're odd. The odds of all these Liverpool guys succeeding feel equal in a way. So I agree with that point.
All right. Two last tier 2 players. I feel like they need to be in this territory, but I'm not feeling as high on them. One is Kevin of Bruyne, Brandon. He's from the Bruyne region of Belgium. Kevin of Bruyne is priced at 9.5 million. So, a little bit of a discount. See, I can't even find him on my chart here. That's how far down you've got to go to find this guy.
He's already moved to Saudi Arabia. Is that what happened?
I don't know. Exactly. It sounds like he's going to stay. There were the comments were a little more optimistic about him than they were about Ederson. So so we'll see. Anyway, KDB's on here somewhere, but he Kevin De Bruyne is 9.5 million. He's 33, if you can believe it, Brandon. Yeah, want to feel old.
Jesus.
Kevin De Bruyne is now 33 years old. He he is injury prone, a bit overpriced, probably at risk of rotation, if only to preserve his health, right? Not necessarily a risk of rotation because he's not doesn't still have it,
Got
but
like
he's
long
just,
COVID or something. What's going on with him?
he might as well. He has the footballer's version of it, right? He needs to be.
He's got long football.
He needs to be, wrapped. He's got long football. That's exactly. He's like Alexis Sanchez style long football. I like it's just we just trash we need to find a way to start trashing Santi Cazorla and just get every former Arsenal midfielder. I know that's true. I'll never say a bad thing about poor Santi, that 5'2" legend. So I think that KDB, he's off the table for me. I don't know. Would you consider KDB?
No, I don't.
Maybe for a good run or something.
It feels like it's a transitional moment. That's the weird thing about Liverpool is we've still got some of these great guys we've been riding with for years, like Salah, and I don't know how long until Diaz enters that. But City just feels like they are going to be quicker to transition, and I think there's enough talent to offer De Bruyne some. It can just let him take the foot off the gas.
A
little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you focus more on the Champions League. I mean, it could be the reverse. I mean, we saw this with oh my gosh, I'm forgetting with Kun Aguero. We saw this I knew I'd get there eventually. We saw this with Kun Aguero though, where he his last season in the Premier League, he basically was a Premier League specialist, which made him a great fantasy asset because you kind of trusted that he was going to get the Premier League starts, and then Gabriel Jesus was going to get the Champions League starts. And I can't remember if it worked out exactly that way, but it felt like we got that with him. So maybe KDB turns into that, in which case he's more viable. But truly a wait and see option. And then the final one is Bruno Fernandes, who has to belong in here. But I have to say, he's really in that Odegaard territory where it's like I have this idea in my head still going back to the pre-COVID season that he is like one of the elite class of fantasy assets. And when you go back, it's really just the one season, right? Like maybe if you count 1.5 seasons, if you want to count the half season when he joined, he was I believe he was a January signing for Man United. And so he had that first year, he had 18 and 14, right? Spectacular. Great. Mm-hmm. Cole Palmer-ish, Brandon. Great returns. But the last 3 years, 10 and 7, these are goals and assists, 10 and 7, 8 and 9, and 10 and 9, right? So not even really getting double-digit returns or just squeaking across the line. And again, maybe you blame some of this on the talent that's around him, and maybe with Garnacho and Mainu, emerging, that helps him a little bit. But I'm just sort of inclined to believe that that's what we're going to keep getting from him, right? And if so, I'm just not sure that he's worth the money, right? You're just sort of, to me, it's like if you were 7.5 million or even 8 flat, maybe I like him more. But to me, I rank him below almost all the midfielders that we've just talked about in this section.
It just seems like the least possible fun you could have with a fantasy pick, and that's easy to say until he starts getting a lot of fantasy points. But the narrative around Manchester United is like they've made a couple of interesting transfers, young guys.
Yep.
I will wait until that corner actually gets turned with Ten Hag before I commit to somebody like Bruno Fernandes. I just can't trust that club at the moment for consistent results, and that's the thing at this level, even at the mid-tier level. You want some semblance of consistency in it, and it takes a lot for Bruno Fernandes to be so inconsistent that we sort of just move him out of the discussion. And that's the kind of season he had last season. So he's on the naughty step.
He's not making fantasy fun, Brandon. I'll say that much about him. Sadly, right? Mm-hmm, I mean, we again, like maybe Ronaldo finally retires and we get. By the way, Ronaldo is 100% going to play in that 2026 World Cup, right? Like,
yes,
he's not going to retire in the next year or two. Right? He's gonna kick around any country that'll have him, right? And like, when he's 40,
I'll have him in the U.S.
He's going to go to LAFC, right? He's going to go to like the hit, like one of these, like, or maybe he'll go to NYCFC.
Oh, I thought you were suggesting it was going to change national teams, which would be incredible.
But, no, that would be incredible. Annoy me on my own content, but no, I just think that I think he'll do like the Messi at Inter Milan or at Inter Miami type move.
Right.
And, anyway, all right. So yeah, we'll see. We're just really hitting all our hater notes here, Brandon. We're hitting them all.
A lot of feelings today.
All right. So somehow we still have 2 sections to go here. So we'll go a little. Well, I knew this was going to be a lot of clubs to cover. Although let's
make this lightning rounds.
I like that. That sounds like the beginning of the Garth Brooks song "Thunder Rolls," which classic.
Yeah, the lightning will soon strike.
Sadly, Garth Brooks not on Spotify. What's up with that, Garth?
Sadly.
Yeah, I know. I'm not the biggest Garth Brooks fan, but I listen to him sometimes.
You got to get back on iHeartRadio. Josh.
You don't like Friends in Low Places, Brandon? Of course you do. Everybody likes Friends
I can sing that song to myself in my head whenever I want. I've got my memory Spotify.
All right, that's true. All right, so anyway, we got our high risk, high reward, mid tier options. There's also I tossed a couple steady but unspectaculars in here, but mostly it's the high risk, high reward guys. So again, we'll whip through these. But Leon Bailey, 6.5 million. Are we sleeping on him because he was mediocre the season before last? It does feel like maybe we are a little bit. 10 goals, 11 assists last season. And Brendan, hands up if you did not know that he had double-digit goals and assists last season, because I have to put my hand up here and confess.
Double-digit assists? What?
He had 10 goals and 11 assists last year.
Okay. All
right. I mean, considering the returns, 6.5 million is quite a good price, right? I mean, you're basically getting like 25% more than you're going to get from Bruno Fernandes for 2 million cheaper. Okay. You have to at least consider Leon Bailey. I mean, I think for me, I believe he was 5 million 2 years ago, and I had him for like a quarter of the season, and it was hugely frustrating. I feel like I got nothing from Bailey during that run. Right. And so I feel like and sometimes you have to wipe the slate clean with a player. And I wonder if maybe we need to start doing that with Bailey. And I wonder as we get closer to game week 1, I could see him starting to pop up in more squads, because again, that price is so good, right?
The recent step of Moussa Diaby as well.
Right, that's true too.
Opens up more spots, and then in the Villa midfield and Rogers, who might be
5 million,
super budget guy. Villa midfield is I agree, going to pop up in the weeks to come.
So Bailey's an interesting option, and Cuckoo, who again, let's maybe almost table him until our pre-game week 1 discussion. I think that there's definitely something there. He's reclassified as a mid, injured almost all of last season. Had some nice moments though. Scored a really nice goal from a corner kick in like the 95th minute, like in the second half. I think they were away, maybe they're at Wolves, and but had 23 goals and 9 assists in his final Bundesliga season. So again, a 23 goal, 9 assist player who was effectively injured all of last season, but was considered a top signing for Chelsea, right? Like when they brought him in, is at a super cheap price.
He's almost like a new signing, Josh.
He's almost like a new signing. He's like the Jurrien Timber of Chelsea. So he's interesting. Steady but unspectacular player coming in for you here, Brendan. It's Morgan Gibbs White, 6.5 million. Interesting thing about him is he has back-to-back 5 goal, 12 assist seasons. Those feel like weird returns to have back to back, don't they? 5 and 12 back to back. That's odd. It's like, I wonder if going into like game week 38 last year, he was like, it's like, I only want to score 1 assist in this game. It does seem kind of fun from a numerology standpoint, Brendan. We need to think more about what 5 and 12 means.
Well, going back to, we learned a couple of weeks ago, I think that 12 is a great number. Yeah. Gibbs White, though, is going back to my stock market metaphors.
Yeah.
I never want this. I feel like this is as high as his stock gets, 6.5 as a price tag. Yeah. This is a bad time to buy. Gibbs White.
You don't want. Yeah, exactly. He's like GameStop or something, right? It's like maybe there's a moment where it's going to shoot up, but long term, it's
the jig is up with him.
Yeah. Mbomo, 9 goals, 7 assists last year. Again, the returns don't really point to how good he was before he injured his ankle, missed months.
Yep.
He was, and granted, Ivan Toney was out for a stretch there, but he was always a good player, and he just really stepped up in Tony's absence. And another player I really enjoyed watching him play. I think he's a really, really fun watching him come out. On the right flank. He's just a really he's super fast too. So, but 7 million, I feel like maybe it's 0.5 too high. I would like to see him at 6.5. I think that's actually the problem with Gibbs White too. Gibbs White, I think, would be better if he was 6 million. It feels like 6.5 is a half million too much. And again, this stuff really ends up mattering a lot, especially going into game week 1, right? 0.5 here, 0.5 there. Garnacho and Mainu, I put them together because Garnacho had the better returns last year. 7 goals, 7 assists, comes in at 6.5 million. It's a very reasonable price. If I were starting the season with one Man United midfielder, I would go with him over Bruno. But Mainu, I just thought he looked really good for England when he started to get minutes, and so I just wonder if maybe there's something there for him. And I don't know if you necessarily start game week 1 for England, but for Man United. Put him in your FPL squad, that is, for game week 1. But I think that he's an interesting option for sure.
I'm surprised to hear you say that because you typically shy away from the more sort of like ball holding, ball controlling sort of point guard players. I don't see him as an efficient fantasy asset.
No, that's
great
true.
Player as he is.
I think it's just like, I don't know that we necessarily know where he's going to kind of settle in that squad still too. So I don't know. So yeah, certainly I think Garnacho is the better option, but I think 5.5 does start to like, you can at least consider some of these players when they're at 5.5, right? Like, especially because a lot of the kind of holding mids that were interesting in that round, like the Declan Rices and the Rodrigos, all got price bumps this year that kind of knocked them out of contention, right? I don't even list them on even in this tier. I don't think they're worth owning. Even if Declan Rice does love a speculative shot from outside the box, I don't consider him worth having in fantasy. And then, two final ones, Brennan Johnson at 6.5, 5 goals and 12 assists last year. Again, I don't mean to be just so focused on goals and assists, but it's just a quick reference point, if nothing else, right? It indicates just how involved they were from an FPL perspective. Sneaky good FPL asset and a great price if he actually locks down the starting spot. There's sort of, I'm not 100% sure that he is an every week starter. I mean, I don't know. He kind of was last year, but I don't know. What do you think about him, about Brennan Johnson?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Doesn't like spark joy.
You're just down on Spurs in general.
Well, this is a problem of mine. It's a personal problem. No offense to any Spurs supporters.
Yeah.
The whole discussion we had about Son, it comes back to Brennan Johnson, and I feel like if I'm going to go in on Spurs, I feel like there are other players maybe I'd rather have. Even Kulusevski, I like him a little bit more. He's a little more explosive.
You're not going to have Kulusevski.
No, I'm not going to have any of these guys. So,
or
I'm not going to have Brennan Johnson. It's no shots at Brennan Johnson. Great player. I wish him the best of luck. I'm probably not going to have him in my fantasy team.
Okay, fair enough. And then Hwang Hee-chan, 6.5 million. Had another player who got injured late. I thought he had some moments where he was spectacular. I had him for a nice stretch in the winter too, where he was, I think the problem is it feels like the front line is a little unsettled for Wolves still. And
some guys popping off in the summer season here, like Gomez has scored a brace yesterday, I think it was,
and Sarabia was really good down the stretch last year as well. So there are some interesting players for Wolves. I don't feel like I have a handle yet on who I'd want from Wolves, if anybody, right? And so, but I did want to throw him in there because he had some great moments last season, and so he deserved a shout out. Brendan, all right, we're going to finish off though with tier 4, which are midfielders from promoted clubs. And there's not a lot here, to be totally honest. I totally understand if you check out now, but we got a couple more options here, Brandon. Dewsbury Hall left Leicester for Chelsea, sadly. So he's a fun player. I was sad to see.
He's doing the Danny Drinkwater.
He pulled the old Drinkwater. So the midfield is still a little up in the air for Leicester. You got Abdul Fatawu. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Didn't watch a ton of championship football, I have to admit, Brandon. So my pronunciation may not be totally there, but 7 goals, 13 assists, 5.5 million. And then Steffi, I like that. Stephy.
Steffi Graf is finally in the league.
Steffi Graf. Yeah, they say there's no second acts in life, Brandon, but Steffi Graf has proven us wrong. Now, Steffi Mavididi, and he was the second leading scorer last season after Vardy with 13 goals. Now, I don't think anyone outside of Leicester supporters are going to have either of these two players, but just planting a little seed. There's a couple players to keep an eye on there. Yeah. For Ipswich, probably the similar thing. Connor Chaplin, I think, would be the player. We're actually hopefully going to have one of our producer patrons on to talk about Ipswich a little more coming into the season. But at the moment, I'll just say that Connor Chaplin, 13 goals, 8 assists, is a player to keep an eye on. Southampton.
I can't wait for Connor Chaplin to score a goal and for Peter Drury to say how he took the other team to all the Stations of the Cross.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's going to be miserable. Whatever he does, it's going to be. So Southampton, at the moment, there's genuinely no one worth discussing. I'm a little, with apologies to friend of the pod, Lucy Brandon. I'm not sure, not sure what we're going to be getting out of Southampton this season. And everyone's really cheap, at least. So that's something.
They sold Che Adams. They're dead to me. I don't even acknowledge the existence of Southampton.
I think all of Scotland is going to have to write them off, sadly. The other Carlos Alcaraz, the non-tennis playing Alcaraz, had some moments, remember, a couple years ago. Rebo, they're $5 million. There's some even cheaper options there. Adam Lallana is back there, Brandon. So he's nice. The return.
Yeah, the good times will never end.
The one thing I will say, though, is you have a couple 4.5 million options from these promoted teams, and sometimes that is handy. I could even see myself having one of these two players if I end up starting with a kind of 4 across the middle to start the season. Harry Winks, long time, former
my
Spur.
Current draft.
Yeah, Harry Winks, locked in starter. I think I was looking at something about him in the hub. I think he averaged 89 minutes last season per match, right? A locked in starter. Nabbed 2 goals. You're really just getting appearance points and consistency there. But sometimes that's all you really need in a fifth, in a fifth midfielder. You just need somebody in case a couple players get injured or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Ipswich, if you want to go a little off you just be a little bit different. Massimo Luongo, 37 starts. So, that's like 90% of the championship season, basically. And had 3 goals and 1 assist. So slightly better returns. Again, these are your kind of defensive mid, holding mid type options. That's what you're going to get for 4.5 million, even from the promoted clubs. But, at least we got a couple options. I feel like, was it last year where there was like no 4.5s? And there was just like nobody. Yeah. It was like, you just went into the season, you're like, I don't really know like who I could even have for this spot.
I think Thomas Suchek at 5.0 was my 5th midfielder for most of the season.
Well, then I got so screwed because Cole Palmer was a 5 million, and suddenly we all had more money than we knew what to do with because we were all starting him every week. So that's your midfielder roundup, Brandon. We actually did kind of do that lightning round style. I'm impressed. Can I hear that lightning one last time?
Oh, absolutely. When you hear this sound, we're going to run through it real quick.
Yeah. Thank you to Garth Brooks for loaning us that drop. All right, Brandon. Well, let's wrap things up with a couple of questions. Jay Dizzle had a question about starting with Haaland and Salah, but you and I talked about that enough already, so I think we can scrap that one. I got 2 other ones though, Brandon. One from Amar B says, "Do we go big in the mid this season instead of big at the back? If so, we would need to go cheap at the back." He says props. The pros for this would be the bonus point change as well as a good variety of 4.5 million defenders. So are you thinking at all about having a 5 across the middle midfield?
I guess that is more appealing to me than going really weak in the back. I'd rather play 2 forwards than have all like 4.5 to 5 guys because that in the defense, because what that means is you're going without Arsenal defenders and probably a City defender.
Yeah.
like maybe that can be worked, but it doesn't sit quite right with me.
Yeah.
So, like, as you've just run through there in the lightning round, there's lots of affordable midfielders to round it out.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. That question becomes really hard to answer now, or it is hard to answer now. It becomes easier to answer once we start seeing these guys actually play and how they perform from a fantasy view. There are going to be a few standout 5.5, 6.5 mids. And once we understand that more in reality in the game, then I'll be happier to ditch one of my forwards and go 5 across the midfield.
Use one of your 5 transfers to
I
think, and one thing I did notice when I was putting this together was I like a lot of the 6.5 million mids. I think there are a couple of 4.5 million mids. I don't love the pool of options at 5 million, 5.5 or 6, right? That is, I find that to be a little bit of a dead zone in terms of what you're getting. And it does feel like some of the players who could have been 6, like Gibbs White, came in at 6.5. And it just, so I think, it does make things a little bit, it just makes it, I think, maybe a little bit easier to have 4 strong midfielders and 1 4.5, right? Because it's just harder to get. I don't know, because I know that I'm not going to go into the season with all kind of 4.5 or 5 million defenders, right? It's just going to be very hard to do. And also, I'm sort of, I really don't think I'm going to get there with Salah and Haaland. I think that's one too many. I think I made what I think is a strong case for not having Salah. But if I do have Haaland, it's really, I don't know how you can have Haaland in your squad and then have 5 strong midfielders too, right? It's going to be really hard to do, especially if you throw Palmer in there as well. So I do think it's going to be an interesting. It just feels like you can maybe get. It's like if you don't have 5 strong midfielders, you could still have like 4 good ones, right? Like maybe you have you have Palmer and you've got Gordon, and then maybe you've got like 2 good 6.5s, right? Mm-hmm. And that would probably means you can still have a decent third forward, and you can have like 1 premium defender and still kind of make things work.
Sure.
So I think that there are some options, but I think if you go 5 across the middle, it probably puts you in a position where you've got like a really cheap third forward, for example, like somebody you just wouldn't ever want to start.
Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing the next question here from Moffat, who asks, if you could just go ahead and clear up what to do with Chelsea on all fronts, that would be most appreciated. They look a special kind of mess through 2 preseason matches, and Cuckoo is so appetizing, but they look like they could take 2 months to get under Maresca's system. So we kind of touched upon this in the Cole Palmer discussion of where does the premium price with Chelsea assets meet the unproven Maresca and the continuing sort of circus that is Todd Bowley's ownership? That all sort of like points to Nkunku. Is Nkunku the solution? Like, he's cheap, he's a way into this team, or is that just sort of like a fraud fantasy signing? And that, why do you want anything to do with this team if you believe all of this to be true about the circus of it all?
It just feels like you could make that, like, there's a bunch of new managers. I think every season you get new managers, even at top clubs, and it doesn't necessarily, I feel like, take that long usually for players to kind of adapt to a new manager, right? And so I think that I guess I'm not super worried about that, right? Because you can look across the Premier League. Liverpool, it's kind of the same. It's a little bit of the same problem with Liverpool, except I think that the problem there is really not. It's not a solid problem as much as it is a 3 midfielders. I don't know which one to have. Maybe there's a bit of a Darwin problem too, because I don't really necessarily know if he's going to lock up that forward spot. And the defense is a problem for Liverpool as well, I think. But we can talk about that on next week's pod. So I think that. I just think there's a general feeling of chaos around Chelsea, right? Like that you brought up Bowley, that hasn't totally gone away, right? And how could it until they start to make the Champions League again with some level of consistency, right? So I think, but I would say, like, at least the pecking order feels pretty established. Like, I don't feel like anyone is going to, like, I think if Nkunku is healthy and looks ready for the preseason, scored in the friendly last, a couple of days ago, then I think Palmer and Nkunku start. and then everyone else is irrelevant from a fantasy perspective, right? Like in terms of the forwards and midfielders. I mean, Nicholas Jackson, I don't know. Maybe there's an argument for him. I'm not really convinced, but maybe there's an argument for him.
It would be so hilarious if he just ended up being the guy who hoovered up all the fantasy points.
It's possible.
Cuckoo and Palmer just are doing all of the on the ball work.
The fact that they play Man City in game week 1 is probably going to help me not have him, which I'm almost like thankful for, right? Like, I'm just not going to be able to talk myself into him, especially if I already have Palmer, right? Or Palmer and Cuckoo. Certainly not going to have 3 Chelsea attacking options. So I think, I think it's kind of the same as it ever was. Well, I shouldn't even say that because it's really just it's Palmer and then a bunch of kind of guesswork. I think if you want to add in Cuckoo to the mix of interesting options, I think you should, then that's fine. And I think after that, I wouldn't really consider anybody.
Agreed. I have nothing more to add to that. What a good, well-rounded Chelsea discussion that was. I hope you're satisfied. Question asker.
Yeah. Well, we'll have more defensive stuff to talk about next week too. I think that's where there is some interesting questions.
Moffat. I'll see you on the Wordle channel, Moffat.
There we go. And speaking of that channel is part of our Discord. If you go to patreon.com/alwayscheating, you can get access to that Discord. Or if you just want to say thank you, if you enjoy listening to the pod and you maybe want to join our have another mini league in your life, we have our Patreon mini league just for Patreon supporters, so it's a little easier to crack than the Always Cheating Super League. And it's also just it's fun to be with some like-minded people. And so you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support us. Brendan, do you want to thank our producers?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you to our highest tier Patreon supporters, Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, Dave Wagner-Lodahl, our buddy Chris Howell, had fun following Chris's journey through Los Angeles this past weekend. Andy Penn, Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Babas Kuhn, Rom Frost, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons, Terrence O'Donnell, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Easy Does It, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Craig Jackson, Colin, Caleb Robbie. We had a bit of a retooling of this list, so it's not super fresh. Caleb Robbie, Brian Clark, Thomas Tislov, Fred Jacobson, The Saint, Gareth H., Shalin F. Kadakia, Rishi Negam, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Linus Vennerstrom, Matthew Skinner, Ben Coombs, Eric Kite, Rune Sandberg, and James Murray Wood. It's so important if you made it this far and you've enjoyed what you've heard, do rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast wherever you can. We'd be so grateful. Follow us wherever you get your social media. We're most active still on Twitter, which is what we'll call it, Hail Cheaters.
Yeah.
And we're pretty much Hail Cheaters anywhere else. All this information, including that Super League code information about Patreon, is at alwayscheating.com. And a quick reminder, if you want 50% off your Fantasy Football Hub memberships, go to fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always. That link is in the show notes. It's also right here on the screen on YouTube. Thank you for putting another great show together, Josh. I feel like I've been dreading tinkering, but I started earlier today with a fresh tinker on my fantasy squad ahead of the midfielder preview, and I'm feeling a little bit more confident bit by bit. So that's kind of like my message at this point in the preseason to managers is like bit by bit, let it come naturally.
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
Well, let's plan to maybe we'll reveal our in progress teams on next week's pod. We'll talk about defenders next week, and then after that, we're going to get really into like game week 1 preview talk. So thanks everyone for listening. Once again, you can find us across all social media platforms, of course. You can go to alwayscheating.com to get the league code and all kinds of other stuff. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/alwayscheating. See you next week. Bye.